Hey friend, Colin here from Sumthins Recording, and today I'm going to show you how to prep your tracks for mixing. We're going to be looking at prepping tracks for mixing today. I have a raw, fresh session here. I'm going to be pulling in tracks from a client, and we're going to set up this session and prep these tracks, or talk about prepping these tracks for mixing. This can take a little bit of time sometimes, but once you get through this, it helps you mix faster and more effectively because there's no stuff you're going back for. Everything's already prepped and ready to go. All you have to do is go down the line and mix the track. Before we dive in here though, if you're ready to go a little bit deeper into the mixing process in its entirety and really start to hone your workflow as an audio engineer, then I have just the thing for you. It is my 7-step mixing checklist, and it's a free guide that's going to walk you through the entire mixing process step by step to help you dial in a repeatable workflow for cranking out professional sounding mixes right from your home studio. Like I said, 100% free to download. You can get access to that by clicking the link below in the video description. Now let's jump in here and look at prepping tracks for mixing. So this is my template here. I've opened up a fresh template. We'll kind of explain a little bit what's going on with the template here, but I have tracks from a client here that need to be mixed. So I want to pull in all these raw files, and we're going to get these prepped and set up for mixing. So I've imported them here, just dragged them into Studio One. One of the nicest features about Studio One is that you can kind of just drag everything in. I'm going to save. I'm going to make sure these save to the external media folder. That way, when I delete the folder from the client, all these files don't disappear. I like to save them to the external folder inside of Studio One. So it's going to save all of these down. Let's kind of look through what we have here. We have a mysterious track that we're going to have to see what that is. Bass, floor tom, 12-string, vocal, kick, guitar, overhead left and right, rack tom, vocal. It looks like we only have one guitar and a snare sample going on. I want to see what that snare sample is about, but let's kind of go through here and see what's going on with each of these tracks. One of the first things you kind of got to do when you import tracks is listen through and see what each thing is. This looks like vocals, so let's see what this is.
That you can live by, and so
that's group vocals. So let's pull this here, call it group vox, and I hit enter in a weird way. I'm going to pull this group vox. So what I'm going to do is each one of these things, figure out what it is, and then we're going to drag it up to its place in my template. So that's group vocals, meaning it's background vocals. This is bass, so all these things came through stereo. Let's see if they're actually stereo or if it's sometimes when you export from something like Logic, you get stereo files right off the bat. So that's not stereo. So I'm going to drag this up to the bass track here, and let's see if we can bounce this to mono here. Cool. So all I'm doing is dragging it from a stereo track to a mono track, Command B, and it bounces it to a mono file. There's a weird clip here at the end. Oh, that's from bouncing it to mono. It looks like when it bounced out to the bar, there was a little noise at the end. Let's see what that's about. Yep, so that was the audio file not being trimmed properly from whoever exported this. Let's see what our floor tom's about. Again, looks like it's in stereo. Let's see if it's actually going on in stereo. Nope, that's a mono file. So same thing here. We're going to drag this up to the floor tom track. And same way, we'll bounce it to mono. Looks fine. So we're going to get all these clips at the end. We're going to have to trim out on all these files. That's okay. That's okay. We can add better fades as we go down. Actually, these group vocals too, are these in mono? Let's take a listen here. I didn't even pay attention because it is a group vocal.
did slowly go by and feed them on your dreams.
Yep, those are also in mono. These look pretty loud too. So let's bounce these and see where we end up volume-wise. Oh, see, that's a stereo track. So let's flip this to mono. Let's bounce it. Yeah, those are insanely loud. We're going to have to pull those down in volume. We'll get there in a second. We've got a 12-string track here. got a 12-string acoustic. That's also in mono, so I'm going to drag this up to the acoustics track, bounce that through. There's our mono acoustic, and you can see we're getting these clips at the end on all these tracks. Looks like we've got maybe a lead vocal. Let's see where this is sitting.
It's just a goodbye. Teach your children well.
Cool. We're going to keep these with the names that kind of came on them here for the moment at least. Let's drag this up to, we're going to put all of these in the lead vocal box for the moment. We'll make it mono because it is. Color it yellow. Bounce it down. Let's see. Yeah, still a little bit kind of iffy on the volume there. Here's our kick drum. I'm assuming this is in mono. Yeah, so that's a live kick drum. It's in mono. Let's drag this up to, leave it on our kick in. It sounds like it's at least inside of a hole on the kick drum. And it's insanely loud as well. Sometimes these stereo files, when you bounce them down, you really see how loud they were when they're bounced out. We've got, let's delete these so far because we don't need those anymore. Got a guitar here. Let's see what that's. I kind of want to go back here before we kind of get too far and maybe do some of this stuff that came out in stereo and pull it down beforehand because the volume looks decent beforehand. So let's fix some of this stuff really quick here. Some of this stereo stuff as we drag it up. Let's fix it immediately in terms of volume. So this looks like it could be too loud. So I'm going to pull it down 2 and see where we end up as we bounce through. That looks fine. So we have a healthier level on the way in here instead of me trying to fix it afterwards. And that makes sure if anything happens on the bounce that we're saved from that. So here's our bass guitar. That looks okay. Kind of clicked it down here. That shortcut I'm using is just bouncing it down or taking it down 3 dB on each of these files. So same thing with the floor tom. I'm going to knock it down just 3 right off the bat here on a mono file. That's just a shortcut I've set up. It's the minus key. So if you come up in Studio One to keyboard shortcuts, you'll be able to find that. If you type in -3, you'll see there's a macro already made for -3 dB. And then I've just set it to the minus key. That way, whenever I click on an audio file, I can click the minus key and it will automatically knock it down 3 dB. Here's that acoustic. We're going to do the same thing here and knock it down at least 3 to start. And here's the vocal we were at. We dragged this entire track up into our lead vocals. And I'm going to pull that down a couple. And I don't want to bounce it in stereo. I want to bounce it to mono. So stereo tracks, you can flip into mono right here. 1 circle is mono, 2 circles is stereo. Here's our kick drum. So here's where we actually were before I went back and redid everything. This looks pretty loud to begin with. So let's knock it down a few here and see where we end up. That's better. Larry guitar, this is where we were. So let's listen to this. This seemed loud. Cool, I'm going to drag this up since it's named appropriately. And we'll just set that here. And we're going to call this 12 string as well. 12 string acoustic. I was going to shorthand it, but that should be fine there. This we're going to flip to mono because it is in mono. Got a better level on that. We'll color it with the rest of the acoustics. We've got another vocal here, so it seems to be in 3-part harmony at least.
The father's help did slowly go by and feed.
We'll bounce that out and drag it up with our other vocal. This one sounded lower than our other one. And I'm going to pull that down 3 dB as well. At least match it in volume with our other one. Now we have our overheads. See, these are also in stereo, so I'm going to assume these are in mono right off the bat here. And let's listen to both of them and see where we end up. Yeah, so both of those are in mono. So let's bounce. The rack tom looks insanely loud looking at that. Let's bounce these to mono. And then what I'll do actually is we'll make a stereo file out of them. So I'm going to take them down one more actually. So we have overheads here. Let's make a stereo file out of them. So since I bounced them, they should show up in the bounce folder. So if we come over to files here in Studio One and we come down to where this is located, songs, under bounces, we should have overhead left and right. So right here, and what we can do is highlight both of them, right click, merge to stereo file. And now we have just an overhead that we can drag in to the overheads track. That way we have it in stereo and we don't have to mess with these mono files, and we can nuke these. So I'm going to Shift T and get rid of those. The rack tom looks so loud. So I'm going to pull that down 4 times. So 12. Let's drag this up to, we'll put it on the first rack tom track and bounce it to mono. Yeah, so that looks about even. We don't have any other rack toms, but we're going to leave that for a moment. We'll come back and get rid of everything. These 2 vocals here look really loud. So let's pull these down. And let's see what these are all about. So here's our first one.
Did slowly go by and feed them on your dreams, the ones they picked.
This second one sounds the same as the other vocal, but with reverb on it. I'm going to pull this first one up, flip it to mono, and bounce it. What else have we got here? Yeah, this sounds the same as the other vocal, but in mono. I think it was this one. Let's listen to both of these together. It sounds the same to me.
You who are on the road must have a code.
Yeah, so it's the same vocal, but with reverb on it. I'm not going to use that. So I'm going to disable that for the moment. And let's call these the same thing at least. And we'll call it verb. I'm going to get rid of this. So I'm going to disable it and hide it because I don't need that. Then we've got our snare and snare sample. These we can get rid of. Let's see what this snare sounds like. Snare sounds okay. Let's get that in mono because it is in mono. We'll bounce that. Looks good. And then the snare sample. Let's see. I'm weary just because I like recording live drums whenever I get a snare sample from a client because they never sound great. So let's listen. It sounds okay. There were a couple hits there that seemed phasey. So I'm not going to use this. I'm going to pull it up though and set it next to the snare at least. And we'll just nuke it. Same thing here, disabled, and then we'll hide it. Now we have all our tracks imported at least, so we'll get rid of everything we don't need. So we don't need this snare. Let's start at the top here. Kick out and kick far. We only have one kick, so we'll call it kick. Same thing with the snare. Excuse me, just the snare top. No snare highs, no snare bottom. We have one rack tom, one floor tom, overheads. We don't have a room, so we'll get rid of that. We have one bass guitar, but what I'll probably do here is copy that down to the bass amp. So anything we want to do, we can do. No electric guitars, so we can get rid of all those. No other guitars besides the lead and the rhythm. No keyboards. And we'll get rid of the lead and harmony vocal, and then we just have one group vocal. So this sounds like a print, this one at the bottom, of these three. So I'm going to do kind of the same thing here. I'm going to drag this up, and then I'm going to nuke the background vocals. So I'm going to disable this because I don't need a print of the three here. I'm going to mix these three together how I like. This is kind of just a reference from the client here. So we'll hide that. We'll make these yellow. Name that. That's fine. And then let's put these in order. That one sounded like the high one at the end there. It came in part of the way through. And then let's get rid of all this on the end. So I'm going to zoom all the way in and see where these tracks end. They end right here, it looks like. I'm going to go a bar out at least. And then get rid of everything. And then add some fades on the end here. And then let's see where they begin and do the same thing here. We've just got some noise at the beginning. Let's see what that's about. So we've got some mumbling there at the beginning. I'm going to leave that for the moment. Sometimes for artists like this, kind of older artists where we're looking back at these songs, I like to leave some of that fun stuff in where they're talking and kind of just for them to look back on. So we're going to leave that for the moment. Now we're going to talk about getting these tracks actually ready to be mixed. So volume-wise, we're going to set them, and we're going to talk about what I would do with each of these tracks. So starting at the kick drum, but we don't need any of these buses either. Kick, snare, toms will be mixed individually. Oh, didn't mean to do that. No electrics, no keys, and no background vocals. All right, so starting at the top here, the kick drum, let's take a listen to this. So it's not the greatest sounding kick drum. So what I'm going to do is run it through what I would run it through for recording here, which means a little bit of EQ and a little bit of compression. This way it's at a better starting point for me when I come to mix this, and it's a little bit closer to what I would like in terms of a recorded kick drum sound. So let's kind of look at, I want a section where it's at least even. So we'll just start at the top, I guess, and see where we're at. I want a little more volume out of all of these, so I'm going to make sure they're running to my drum bus, and I'm going to click on my limiter here. So the volume's going to jump up a bit. Be aware of that. That looks like our biggest peak there, so that's where I'm setting the most compression, just 6 dB. I've pulled out everything at 400 hertz, added 2 dB at 7K, and 2 dB at 50. So a little bit of bottom end, a little bit of top end, pulling out all that nasty mid-range. I'm going to make sure I don't go any further than 6 dB on these bigger peaks here, and we should be good on reduction. We go a little bit over, but that's fine on that biggest one. So what I'm going to do here is bounce this. But you know what I'll do first is save a layer of all these on the drums in case I need to get back to them. And we'll call them OG for original. And then on the kick drum here, on all of them, I want to get rid of layers follow events. We're going to render this EQ and compression down. So we have a raw kick drum sound ready for mixing. So I'm just going to copy this down, render event effects. Now we have a nicer kick drum to start with when it comes mix time. We're going to look at the snare here and do the same thing. Let's see what this sounds like. Now the snare drum here is kind of wonky sounding, and it looks wonky too. We have these louder sections, and then it gets really, really quiet. And it honestly doesn't feel like he starts hitting the drum harder. It feels like the microphone's whacking out because the volume just increases of him hitting the drum. I think I might sample replace this, but with a sample from itself. So let's find a good snare hit here and at least get this started. I'm not going to make you watch me sample replace this, but... That's a good enough one right there. So all I'm going to do is duplicate this. We're going to pull this snare hit down, and then I'm going to tab to transient. We're going to cut there. I'm going to zoom all the way in, and we're going to make a little sample out of the original snare sound. So we can see where the snare rings out to. I'm going to add a little fade at the beginning, and we're going to cut this down and add a fade here as well. We want it to be as much of just the snare as possible. So let's see where this is sounding. I was talking while I did that and I had it muted. All I'm doing, I've pulled this snare down and I'm turning this into a snare sample here. So I've added some fades. Let's see what it sounds like. That's fine. That sounds good enough for me. So I'm going to bounce this in place. So if you turn, snap to grid and everything off, it'll bounce it exactly where it is. Now we have a snare sample, and I'll show you how I lay this in real quick, but I'm not going to make you watch me do the whole thing because that's where this stuff gets time consuming. So I'm going to copy this guy. We're going to come to the beginning of the snare track here, and for each of these hits on the snare drum, we tab to transient, move down to the next track, and we paste in our snare sample. And we kind of just move like this through the snare drum. There's no fills or anything, so it doesn't take very long, but we can make it through the whole track like that. That sounds fine. Let me edit out the toms real quick, because that's what I would do next. Let's see where these are sounding. So this is what I would do next. I would go on the toms and I would remove the bleed. Okay, so all I would do, come to the tom hit, we go after it, get rid of what we don't need, and then fade the tom. And I'm gonna make this fade just a touch more aggressive because that was a big cymbal hit there. Fade in, fade out, and now we have... Okay, and we would do that with all of our tom hits. We only have a couple more, so I'll do that really quick here for you. So you can see what we're doing. See this guy here? That's a nice high tom there. That's cool. That's cool. So same thing. Fade in. Listen to where it ends. Fade out. And then listen, make sure it fades clean. Cool. Let's do our last two here. We don't have anything. We can see where our toms are, but it does look like the bleed's quite excessive on these, and it sounds like it too. Let me make sure I don't miss anything going into these. So we have added our fades there. And that's the end of our song. So let's make sure this fades good here. And our drums should be good. There's never much you can usually do to the overheads, maybe some EQ and compression if need be. That's good there. So we've got our toms. And same thing here. All I'm going to do is bounce them to match the rest of the kit. Overheads, we'll listen to these, but I never do much to them on the way in like this. What I will do though, because I just heard it, is flip-flop these. They are panned drummer perspective. I'm going to pan them audience perspective, and I'm actually going to bounce that to the track here, because that's one less plugin I need to have running is good for me. So we're going to flip these, make them drum or audience perspective on the way in. I heard the ride was on the right side. I want the ride on the left side like you're looking at a drummer. So there's our overheads. Excuse me. All we're going to do on the bass, so these are good for the moment, is enable my EQ on it. It doesn't look like it needs any compression, but let's listen here real quick. I lied. I'm going to put some compression on it. So this is the work we do on the way in to make sure everything's ready come mix time. The less work you have to do when you come to mix these tracks, the more creative you can stay in the process. So let's get just a little bit of reduction on these bigger notes. So just a touch on some of these notes here, and then this bigger note in the middle was up over 3 dB reduction. That's fine by me. I'm going to do the same thing here. I don't need the second one at the moment. We'll pull that down after we bounce it. I'm going to duplicate the layer, call it original, and then from here, no layers follow events. We'll bounce this. That way we're going to have a more even bass sound on the way in, because if I was recording this, I probably would have had the bass running through a little bit of compression on the way in. That's quite loud. That's okay though. He's going to get quieter as we do them. So I'm going to knock him down 3 dB. We'll pull it down. And then all I'm going to do, just so it's ready for mixing, is turn on the frequency split trick across these two. Cool, that's ready to go. The guitars sounded... Oh, I didn't even need to bounce that, did I? I got tricked by the volume being up on me. Nice, okay, let's throw these back on. So be careful with your zoom, huh? These guitars should be okay. Let's listen. Guitars sound great, vocals will just need a little bit of tuning. So the only thing left to do here with these tracks to make sure they're prepped and ready for mixing is to finish the sample on the snare drum, and then this track will be good to go. So here are our steps to get this track prepped and ready to mix. We're importing our tracks, we're identifying what everything is, sorting it into groups or into folders. Then we're going through and checking our gain. We're making sure, does anything need to be sample replaced? Do we need to EQ or compress everything? And then once everything's set, we are ready to mix through this track top to bottom. I hope that was helpful for you. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, if you're ready to take your mixes to the next level and really start dialing in your workflow as an audio engineer, then I have just the tool for you, and it is completely free. It is my 7-step mixing checklist, and you can download it below to start creating more professional mixes in less time. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.